What's going on, Broncos country? Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. Matthew Peterson here with a live show this Tuesday afternoon, breaking down the buzz on the street right now in Denver surrounding your favorite team. So we're going to run through the latest news and rumors, talk about some potential trade targets. It's June. Things are a bit thin out there content-wise, so I thought we could have some fun with some blockbuster trades. You know what I mean? And then we have a mailbag to end the show. So if you have any questions, get them in early. You can super chat to guarantee a spot on screen, or you can go the hashtag Broncos route in the chat section. Now, while we let the audience build up and let everyone click on the notification to join the show, shout out your city. Let me know where you are tuning in from today. Not only is it great to see how big Broncos country is, but it's always good to see familiar faces in the chat. It's always good to see familiar spots as well. So let me know where you are tuning in from. I'll be giving shout-outs to everyone who chimes in down below. We've got I'm Frey tuning in from Missouri. Eddie is in Greeley, Colorado. Italiano Stallone, ciao. Octavio Rodriguez tuning in from Phoenix, not West Virginia, as I recall. What's going on, Ronald? Good to see you. Dimitri's in Fort Myers, Florida. I was in Fort Myers 2 months ago, right before the draft, for a wedding. Very good time. Went to the Fort Myers Art Museum. Tristan is watching from Iowa. We've got Grand Rapids, Michigan here. Broomfield, Colorado from Jack. That's where my cousin John lives. Noel is watching from Guam. Rhett is in Texas. Bahamas in the house. Ramon, as always, in Kansas City, deep behind enemy lines. Now, a segment of today's show that I'll get you guys a quick sneak peek at for tuning in early is going to be on Trey Lance, because I don't think Denver would be completely out of a Trey Lance trade if it becomes really readily available that Brock Purdy's their guy and they want to just move on from Lance. Well, I think Denver after last season should do their homework on all quarterback options. We got a super chat coming in, though, from Brian Salanders. Brian, first-time super chatter. Thank you so much for supporting the show. First-time super chat. That's what you love to see. Brian, the early MVP of today's live show. Thank you so much for supporting us here. Shout out to Brian Salanders with a $2 super chat from Zeke Elliott, Ohio. Is that Zeke's hometown? I didn't know Zeke had a town named after him in Ohio. But Brian, thank you so much. Now, like we were talking about, would you trade for Trey Lance? Would this be just, before we start talking about picks and whatnot, are you interested at all in Trey Lance? Yes or no? For me, it really comes down to what does it cost to get him? If it doesn't cost you that much, I think it's worth at least, taking a flyer on a guy that at some point was worthy of being a top 3 pick. We know that the NFL draft is not perfect, and no team would take a flyer on Jamarcus Russell now just because he was the first overall pick. But Trey Lance is super duper young. Like, he just turned 22 years old type of young. So I think for Denver, they should be, not turning away any option at quarterback with the way Russell Wilson played last season. Now, I've got a whole bunch of no's coming in. This kind of cost me a lot. Tamora says no, cost too much likely. If you ignore the cost, because I agree I'm not interested in trading away a first-round pick for Trey Lance, but ignore the cost. Just, are you interested in adding Trey Lance to this roster for what it's worth? And then we'll explore how much it costs to get Trey Lance. But just surface level, do you want to see this team acquire Trey Lance? We got a super chat coming in from Ronald Putnam. Look at the super chats flowing in early, Mr. McCullough. We definitely need to consider more edge rushers on a one-year deal. If we can get Lance for a third round, go for it. That's kind of where I'm at right now, where if Trey Lance ends up being a great quarterback once he's healthy and he's in a system where, well, it's not that the Shanahan system is a bad one, but he's in a spot where he's not constantly being kind of pushed down the depth chart from Jimmy G and Brock Purdy, you'll look back and go, what an all-time steal. Denver got the 3rd overall pick for a 3rd round pick because he was injured to start his career. That could be great value. As for the edge rushers portion of the show, other question, I don't really disagree. I am not drinking the Kool-Aid on Randy Gregory and Baron Browning being either a double-digit sack guy in 2022 or 2023 now, right? Gregory, I don't have much belief in playing 17 games. And Browning, I think, is a good player. I think Browning's ceiling is probably like 7 to 8 sacks. And that's fine. not everyone can be a double-digit sack player. Last year in the NFL, there were only 12. So if you're not going to have a clear-cut alpha dog, get a good committee and add another player to this committee right now because it's a bit thin after the starters. Now, of course, probably the biggest sports topic in Denver right now is on the Nuggets. Shout out to Denver for hopefully hoisting not just a Stanley Cup trophy last year, but also an NBA trophy this year. So who you got? Nuggets or Heat? Series tied up at 1-1. Game 3 in Miami tomorrow. Show me all those DENs in the chat right now. I got the Nuggets. I just do not see a world where the Heat go up 2-1. I mean, shout out to Miami for putting together an awesome game plan in Game 2 and battling back after blowing an early lead. Like, you can tip your cap to them. But I think the Nuggets are going to take care of business from here on out. So I've got Denver. Let me know who you got. Whole bunch of DENs coming in. We got the Bronco kid going with Miami. I don't like that. Tamora says Denver in 6. Give me Denver in 3. I don't know how they get that done mathematically, but it just goes to show the Nuggets, I think, are going to overpower the Heat in a 7-game series, and it ain't going 7 games. So I got the Nuggets, honestly, in 5. I think they just kind of steamroll Miami from here on out, right? They go up 2-1. They go up 3-1. Maybe the Heat make it close in Game 5, but the Nuggets ultimately cover, and they win the NBA championship. So I know I'm going to be jinxing that for a lot of Nuggets fans watching right now, but you don't have to worry about me jinxing it. They are going to win the finals. Like I've never been more sure of something in the NBA than right now. I'm not going to Stephen A. Smith this where I predict the wrong finals championship for 8 straight seasons. The Nuggets are going to win. It's just that simple. We got a question already coming in from Dimitri, which kind of leads me to my next point here. If you have any questions, get them in the chat right now. We just saw a super chat come in, and we'll include that in our mailbag at the end of the show. But you can always go the chat route to get your question on screen. Hashtag Broncos like Dimitri just did. You have to include the hashtag Broncos in your question somewhere, the start, the middle, or the end. Otherwise, the software can't read it from the chat and push it on screen. So get those questions in early and often. Keep peppering them down there. Hashtag Broncos, and we'll include them in our mailbag today. Now, speaking of today's show, this is what we've got on tap for you guys. The latest news and rumors. Get some fun topics to explore. Then we got some trade targets for Denver, some blockbuster trade ideas. It's June. I thought we'd have a bit fun while the offseason is kind of in a slow period, if you will. And then a live Q&A. Like I just mentioned, Super Chat guarantees a spot on screen. Or you can go the economy line. What's the line called at Disney? Standard? I'm blanking on the name right now. But anyway, hashtag Broncos, and we'll get your question on screen as well. But you will be at the mercy of producer Tex to pick which questions he likes the most. What is the line called at Disney? There's a Fast Pass line, and then there's the other line. And I'm blanking on what the other line is called, and I'm one of those adult Disney people. You got the Fast Pass line. Standard? No. It's not called Standard. We're going to start the show as someone puts it in the chat for me to help me end this brain fart here. At Disney, there are 2 lines. Fast Pass line and the other line. What the heck is the other line called? Okay. This is not making for good radio, so we'll just stand by. That's it. That is what I was looking for. Okay. Standby line. Thank you, McCullough. Now, let's jump into a live Broncos breakdown. Coming up on today's show, we're going to look at an update from Yannick Ngakoue, who commented on what he's looking for in a team, and we'll figure out whether or not Denver could be a perfect fit. And then we have a trade candidate via Bleacher Report we'll explore at the back half of today's show. So all that coming your way, but before we jump into the first segment, shout out your city. We picked up a lot of new subscribers so far in the offseason, and it's always good to see where everyone is watching from. So scroll on down to the comments section. Let me know where you are tuning in from. Let's see who the furthest Broncos fan is from Denver. Type your city you're watching from right now. Yannick Ngakoue leads today's show because he recently voiced what he is looking for in a team in free agency. Frankly, I am shocked that he is still on the market in early June. I don't think anyone saw this coming after he came off a 7th straight 8+ sack season. Now, PFF doesn't really care about his sacks all that much because they ranked him 108th out of 119, which I think speaks to his poor run defense and his boomer bust tendencies, where he's going to get you those 8+ sacks, but the rest of the snaps are going to be like empty calories, sort of. So I think this could be a reason why no team has signed him. Maybe he's asking for a boatload of cash and he's just going to wait out teams, and there has been interest. I'm not exactly sure, but I am sure of this. Denver should be interested in adding more edge rushers here. Now, this is what Yannick Ngakoue said on a Sirius XM NFL radio interview. I definitely want to play for a contender, play for a team and an organization that wants to win a Super Bowl. That's one of the things on my agenda, to be able to help and contribute to that. Hopefully, I can get some great interest from a contender. Now, I can guarantee that Denver is one of the organizations that wants to win a Super Bowl. I can't say that for all of them. Last 20 years, not the Commanders, for example. But the key word I took out of that couple sentences right there was hopefully, right? Because I can't go up to Yannick Ngakoue and say, you want a contender? The 2022 5-win Denver Broncos, now those are Super Bowl contenders. A lot has changed since then, mainly adding Sean Payton, and that's definitely going to boost Denver's stock going into 2023. But a lot of the top-tier teams are kind of set at pass rusher. We saw the Bills add Leonard Floyd. That kind of knocks them out of looking for another edge rusher. So if Yannick Ngakoue doesn't get any calls from his top list of contenders, Denver could be sitting pretty right now with Sean Payton and a good head on their shoulders at Mile High as a team he would be interested in playing for. When we look at Denver's front five, I mean, if you were to add Yannick Ngakoue, I think you line him up next to DJ Jones opposite Zach Allen, and that is a good pass rushing unit, right? Baron Browning and Randy Gregory when healthy, with Zach Allen, an ascending defensive lineman, DJ Jones to focus on the run, and then Yannick Ngakoue in there. You're definitely selling out for the pass. There's not a bunch of great run stoppers outside of DJ Jones, but in 2023, it's all about getting after the quarterback, right? Teams are passing it more than they are running it. So while I'm not in love with the idea of punting on run defense altogether, for obvious passing situations, this could be a great rotation to have. Now, Ngakoue, the last 4 seasons, has been one of the most consistent defensive ends, outside linebackers in football. Has never gone below 8 sacks in a season. The last 2 years combined for 19.5 sacks, with the Raiders in 2021 putting up 10, and last year for the Colts, 9.5. And he would fit in quite nicely for this edge rushing unit in Denver, because look at the stats last year. The highest sack getter was with Zach Allen, with 5.5 sacks. The highest sack getter for the Broncos last year was Baron Browning with 5 sacks. So this is a room that has some optimism in it, right? A lot of hope that when healthy, this unit can be very productive. But what happens if Randy Gregory plays 6 games again? And if Baron Browning is just another 5-sack player, which is fine, right? But if you don't get a sophomore step from Nick Bonito, and Zach Allen improves from a 5.5-sack player to a 7-sack player, you're not even really sniffing a double-digit sack player, which Yannick Ngakoue has been multiple times in his career. So now I want everyone watching to be the GM and let me know if you think the Broncos should sign Yannick Ngakoue. He's looking for a contender. I'm not going to lie and act like Denver is right there with the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Bengals to win the Super Bowl. But with Sean Payton, a top 5 coach in the NFL, and hopefully a rejuvenated and turned around Russell Wilson, this team could easily compete in the AFC and surprise a lot of people. As for the financial side of things, in case you're wondering, Denver's got a hair over $10 million, which it doesn't mean that if they give him, say, a $12 million contract, they're in the red, negative $2 million. Remember, it's only about the cap hit. Now, you could always lower the cap hit by slapping void years on or putting a lot of money into a signing bonus. If you're looking for a piece of framework, a blueprint for what a Yannick Ngakoue contract could look like, look no further than Leonard Floyd's. We just signed with the Bills, a 1-year, $7 million contract. Now, a lot of incentives in there, which can make it worth up to $9 million, and I expect something similar for Ngakoue wherever he signs. They guaranteed all $7 million, so the cap hit's not that high, and I think that's probably what Ngakoue is going to be getting, right? I mean, Leonard Floyd and him are in similar tiers as far as edge rushers go. Both players, 8+ sacks the last 3 seasons. Leonard Floyd is more of an outside linebacker than a defensive end, so they're not quite apples to apples. But I think this is a good starting point for what to expect in a Yannick Ngakoue contract. So if you're worried about paying him $15 million, I don't think that's going to be the case anymore. Now, if a move is made, you guys know we're going to cover it here at the channel. For those of you that have been subscribed, you know that. But if you are not subscribed, we'll get you a video. We'll go live. We'll do all the bells and whistles anytime Denver makes a big move. So make sure to subscribe and help us reach 14,000 subscribers. It's been a fun climb up to this next milestone. Help us push us over the edge by hitting that sub button down below for absolutely nothing. Now, moving on to our next segment of the show, KJ Hamler. Bleacher Report picked him as a trade candidate for Denver after combing through all 32 NFL rosters, and this is who they picked for the Broncos. Right off the bat, a couple thoughts. One, at least they didn't pick Courtland Sutton because that's getting a bit boring, right? We have heard a ton about Courtland Sutton trade talk, and believe me, I'm getting a bit tired of it too. And number two, no shit, Sherlock. Who's calling for KJ Hamler, though? Like, sure, it's easy for Denver to be interested in trading Hamler away, but who's picking up the phone on the other end? This is not a KJ Hamler slander portion. This is just being honest. When you have missed as much time as Hamler has and the run of injuries he has had, no team is probably going to be interested in trading for him. They'll just wait for him to be cut and then sign him after the 53-man roster cuts are made. So some background information on the former second-round pick. Came out of Penn State back in 2020. He has played in less than 50% of possible games through 3 seasons, just 23 so far. And we know that he suffered a really, really tough ACL and hip injury back in 2021. 2022, it looks like a full year to recover. Every time he took one step forward, it's kind of like taking 2 steps back, though. But then, unfortunately, we saw him suffer a torn, or partially torn rather, pectoral muscle back in March, which currently has him in line to be ready to go-ish around training camp. Unfortunately, it's just been a really, sad story for KJ Hamler. The injuries have constantly gotten in the way of a player who had incredible speed coming out of Penn State, but an ACL, a hip injury, and now a pec injury, it really makes you wonder what the future is like for Hamler. Now, before we get into this even further, today's sponsor, BetUS, has your back. When you guys go to chatsports.com/bet, they don't just give you a deposit bonus with some buckaroos in it. They're going to give you a 125% deposit bonus when you use the promo code Broncos125. Sign up today, put some money down on the NBA Finals, the MLB, maybe fade the Rockies. Oh, they're having a decent run lately. But regardless, make sure you make all of your picks at chatsports.com/bet. Promo code Broncos125. Now, more on KJ Hamler. He has 3 touchdowns in his 3-year NFL career. If I remember, all 3 came in his rookie season. Just 620 yards, 42 grabs. It's been a very, unfortunate story for KJ Hamler because of the injuries. It's not because of a lack of talent. We saw some good flashes in his rookie season to be optimistic about him being someone who can stretch the field. Ultimately, they sort of punted on that idea, I think, when they added Marvin Mims in the draft because that's what they hoped KJ Hamler would have been. But the story for his career has been the injuries. Had a concussion in his rookie season, and then in 2021, early on, the ACL tear, which was not your average ACL tear. It was more than just that. They had to move parts of, I think, skin or tissue or whatever from one knee to the other knee, a dislocated hip. It was a brutal recovery and road back for Hamler. And last year, he was on and off with a hamstring strain, and then this year in the offseason while working out a partially torn pec. So it's been a long list of injuries, and it's a bummer. It sucks to see. It really does. But who is calling to trade for a wide receiver who's got an injury list that's equivalent to a CVS receipt? I just don't see a team out there, Bleacher Report, who is dying to pick up the phone and trade for a guy who is coming off a partially torn pec in the offseason. And in the regular season, it was another soft tissue injury, the hamstring. Before that, an ACL, a hip, and a concussion before that. It's just not adding up to me for any team to be interested in trading for Hamler. They're going to look at Denver's roster, and they're going to start counting the wide receivers and go, Sutton, Judy, Patrick, Marvin Mims, Marquez Callaway. You're running out of roster spots. We'll just wait you out. So for that reason, I don't think this trade is very likely. And if you're Denver, why trade him for nothing, right? If he can recapture that second-round talent, boom, you held on to him. You went through the up and downs, and now you come out the other side, and KJ Hamler's healthy and hopefully a very productive speed receiver. Trade him for a 2028 7th-round pick that you're never going to see. If you're not going to get anything for him, why not hold on to him? The only way I see them trading Hamler is if they tell Hamler, we're going to cut you. We like you. We can trade you now to a destination sort of your choice to give you a leg up so you're not a free agent and you got an inside track to maybe make their 53-man roster. That's really the only path I see for Hamler, and it's a bummer because injuries suck. That's going to do it for us on this edition of the Broncos Breakdown. Thank you all so much for tuning in, taking some time out of your day to come hang out with me. If you like today's show, like the video, subscribe, comment, all those YouTube cliches. Greatly appreciated. Be the GM for me. Should the Broncos sign Yannick Ngakoue? What are we thinking here? Yes or no? I'm going yes. Is this team better with him? Yes. That's the end of the conversation for me. It's not going to cost you that much, right? Usually the hurdles of this are the cost. We just saw Leonard Floyd's contract. You could swing it if you're Denver. And is he going to stunt anyone's growth? Anyone's growth, right? Maybe Nick Bonito, but honestly, I didn't see a ton from Nick Bonito. And granted, just a rookie season to really believe he's building something and he's going to be a monster sack player for Denver for years to come. Still early in his career, but I don't mind adding Yannick Ngakoue. Eddie Martinez is on my side here. Italiano Stallone 007 is with me. The Bronco Kid is here as well. We got Galaxy69 saying, we also have the worst coach in the league and a quarterback who didn't play very well. I don't know what the context is, but you are correct with what you said there. Yes, I agree with Tim. Tim has better hands and speed. Talk about Tim in the chat. Oh, Tim Patrick. I thought there was a Tim in the chat right now. I don't know if Tim Patrick has better speed than KJ Hamler. Well, maybe now. I'm not quite sure what Hamler's top speed is following the injury. So then again, Tim Patrick's coming off an ACL tear, so you can kind of make the argument both ways. Timor, I hope Russell was bad because the offense they ran. Sure hope so too. That is the saving grace right here, that it is 110% Hackett's fault. And with him gone now, Russell Wilson will go back to being the Pro Bowl level quarterback he was for so long in Seattle. Now, next up on the show, we're going to have some fun. We're going to go through some blockbuster trade ideas. It's blockbuster trade ideas, right? They're not to be taken uberly serious, but it's a little bit of a fun segment to do in the off season. I know someone's going to get super worked up over it and go, there's no way this is happening. And you're not fun at parties, dude. That's my response to you. Galaxy, do you think our defense will take a step back? I'll answer that question in the mailbag if you use hashtag Broncos in your question in the chat. That way we can pull it and put it on screen for everyone to see Galaxy69. Now, McCullough, do we have the green light for the next segment? All right, guys, let's jump into some blockbuster trade ideas. Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. Matthew Peterson here with some blockbuster trade ideas. Now, before we proceed any further, if you're the dude that's going to go down in the comment section and say this is never happening, you're no fun at parties. It is the middle of the off season. Let's just have some fun and swing for the fences. They all might be pop flies and can of corns into shallow left field, but who knows? It's the NFL. Denver has pulled off already a couple blockbuster trades recently. You can never quite rule out the Payton from making another big move. Now, if Denver is going to make a move for one of the players we'll talk about today, these are the picks at their disposal. They've got a first and a third. They had 2 thirds. They traded one of them to move up to get Riley Moss. They have a pair of fourths. They got the second one from Miami after trading Bradley Chubb, a fifth, and a pair of sevenths. So they have some picks to work with. Like that first-round pick can get a lot of the players we'll talk about today. I don't think they should move on from that first-round pick. That's a long time without having one. But if they are, gung-ho on getting one of the players we're going to look at today, they do have the means to get a trade done. So the first trade target on today's show is Trey Lance. And here we go. This is surely going to get the room on its feet. So the reason why we're talking about Trey Lance is because An NBC Sports reporter from the Bay Area who covers the 49ers put out a tweet with a link to an article that said, the recent vibe coming out of 49ers headquarters suggests a belief Brock Purdy is the favorite to be the team's starting quarterback when the season opens September 10th at the Steelers. Now, he also had a link to that tweet right there to an article. That article got deleted. So I don't know if John Lynch and Shanahan came crashing down on this reporter and said, take this story off the interweb, but it was out there because the internet never dies. So if the 49ers are going to go with Brock Purdy, which I don't think should be a big surprise to anyone, do they really want to hold on to Trey Lance for a third season as being the backup quarterback? Maybe not. Maybe they decide we found our Tom Brady, we found our day 3 gem in Brock Purdy. We're going to proceed with him, and let's just move on from Lance so we can sort of end all the questions surrounding who's the quarterback. Is it going to be Trey Lance or is it going to be Brock Purdy? Now, Lance does not have a ton of film out there on him. He's only played in 8 NFL games so far. He started 4. And remember, his last season in college, it was wiped away from COVID. Season before that, he only played in 1 game. The guy has hardly played any football the last 4 to 5 seasons, and he's still only 22 years old. So if the price isn't very high for Trey Lance, which I think it's probably going to be a bit higher than what I would like to see, but let's just say it's not a very ridiculously high asking price, you got to at least consider it, right? After the way Russell Wilson played last season, Denver should not leave any stone unturned when it comes to future quarterback options. It's also a potential win-win for Denver and San Francisco, right? Starting with the Broncos, they can get a potential head start on replacing Russell Wilson. If he is cheeks again in 2023, they can trade for Trey Lance and do a Jordan Love cycle where he's a backup for maybe a bit longer than envisioned to start his career, but he's still very young and he can learn from Russell Wilson and maybe take over in 2024. Sean Payton also gets a young quarterback to groom, right? He's a quarterback whisperer. He's done great things with Drew Brees and a lot of other quarterbacks throughout his career. I'm sure he'd love to work with a raw project like Trey Lance, who has so many great skills. And then, like I said, great skills. He's a high ceiling type player. Trey Lance can make a lot of great throws. This is not a Trey Lance is going to be a great quarterback portion of the show. This is we can at least understand with his potential, it's worth inquiring. Why does San Francisco want to do this? They kind of get to move on from all the drama surrounding, is it Lance or Purdy, and they can commit to Brock full time. And in the process, they get some draft assets back. So if you were the GM, if you were either Payton, would you trade for Trey Lance? Before we talk about what it costs to get him, because that's a fair point to make. Just off the cuff. Are you interested in getting Trey Lance? Yes or no? Let me know down in the comment section. There's not a whole lot out on Trey Lance. He only has 4 starts in his career. I mean, he started 1.5 games in 2022. The first one was in Chicago. It was an absolute monsoon. He couldn't throw the ball more than 20 yards. No one could that day. But there has been a lot of good in Trey Lance. He's got the athleticism. He can run well. He's got the crazy strong arm that allows him to make a lot of throws, which so does Zach Wilson, and we know how well that works. So it's not just about having a strong arm. But I guess the big point I want to make here is if the asking price is reasonable, right? If the asking price for Trey Lance was just a 7th rounder, all teams would do that, right? It's worth throwing a 7th rounder at a player like Trey Lance to see if he can live up to be that top 3 quarterback he was picked. So if it's not going to be a 7th rounder, which it's not, at what point is it acceptable for you, right, where you can stomach it? For me, if it's a 3rd rounder, I don't think Trey Lance has been all that great so far, but I can at least accept the fact that a 3rd rounder is probably worth the flyer on Trey Lance to see if Sean Payton can make him this team's quarterback for the next decade plus, right? I wouldn't do it for a 1st. Even if Denver had a 2nd, I probably wouldn't do it for a 2nd. 3rd is right around my boundary. If it's a 4th, I'm in. I don't think it costs a 4th. I think San Francisco would probably want a bit more. But then again, they might not get a lot more because who's calling for a guy that's played such little football in the last 3 to 4 seasons? Moving on to our second trade target. This is Budda Baker. We talked about him a couple of times on the show already, but I figured we'd include him one more time because this appears to be a name that a lot of fans are interested in. So Bleacher Report identified Denver as a trade destination for Budda Baker a couple of days ago. So there's some buzz on the streets about Budda Baker reuniting with Vance Joseph, who he played under for quite some time after he was canned at Mile High. Now, the report from Adam Schefter earlier this offseason was that Budda Baker wants to become the highest paid safety or get traded. I don't see Arizona shelling out big bucks for a safety like him, because just safety is not a super valued position. We're in the midst of a reset down in the desert. So maybe they do try to get some picks for a new GM and start rebuilding around Kyler, or maybe it's Caleb Williams. Who knows? Now, Denver's safety room, it has a great safety room, I think. Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson are two very, very good starting safety tandems. Caden Stearns, I think, could also start for a majority of the NFL. You have J.L. Skinner, who I like a lot coming out of Boise State. And if P.J. Locke and Delaren Turner-Yell are the worst safeties on your team, that's not a very bad safety room. But Budda Baker is special. We know this. Multiple-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro safety, 27 pass breakups, 7 interceptions under Vance Joseph. He has been very good with Vance Joseph as his defensive coordinator. So here's my stance on Budda Baker. Given the high draft capital it would probably take to get Budda Baker, and then make him a top-paid safety, I'm passing. I just don't think Denver is a top 5 highest-paid safety away from making a lot of noise, right? I think they've got to start by holding on to some assets, unless it's, a position, a game-changing player at a position like a quarterback, which is my backdoor way of saying I'm interested in holding out on Trey Lance if it doesn't cost too much. But for Budda Baker, they've got Justin Simmons. They've got other good safeties. Hold on to your picks. Don't give them all this money. They have Surtain and Simmons. That hasn't beaten the Chiefs yet. Why is Budda Baker going to be the difference maker? I don't see it. Now, before we get on to the rest of our trade candidates, if we got any new people watching right now who have not subscribed to the channel, go down right now, hit that sub button, type me in the chat, and I'll give shout-outs to those of you who are new to the channel and type me down below. If you're already subscribed, you've gotten your fair share of shout-outs. New subscribers only, trying to give back to Broncos country. So hit that sub button for absolutely nothing and type me down below for a shout-out. Let's power our way through these next 3 trade targets here, starting with Chase Young. So Chase Young has been rumored to be on the market. Washington did not pick up his 5th-year option, which was definitely a head-scratcher. A former 2nd overall pick has unfortunately been limited to just 12 games over the last 2 seasons. He was the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year back in 2020, but an ACL injury in 2021, which basically took him, 18 months to recover, made him miss most of 2022. And now Chase Young has kind of fallen out of favor in the nation's capital, right? When you look at his stats over the last 3 seasons, only 1.5 sacks the last 2 seasons. That's not very good. But he was awesome his rookie season, right? For a rookie to have 7.5 sacks, think about that. Just as a rookie, you're already halfway to double-digit sacks. There's a lot of reason to believe once he's healthy, he could be a double-digit sack guy for years to come. And I think for Washington, they kind of want to just move on a little bit because there might be some, I don't say bad blood, but some frustration with Chase Young and his rehab in 2021 and 2022. Now, Denver's front 5 has some good pieces, but there's no piece that I can say confidently will be on this team in 2 to 3 seasons, right? Baron Browning is up and coming. Randy Gregory has a make-or-break season. Zach Allen just signed a 3-year contract, but teams can always get out of that after a season or 2. So you don't really have a future at the edge rusher position. Chase Young could be that for you. So if you can get Chase Young for less than a first-rounder, I think it's worth a chance. I think we're kind of forgetting how special of a player he was coming out of Ohio State, and we've let time sort of warped our brains to forget about Chase Young. But Chase Young looked so good his rookie season. A new setting for Chase Young, a new home and whatnot might be what he needs coming off this injury, and Denver could get the 2nd overall pick and their next Von Miller, if you will, for years to come. For a 2nd rounder, a 3rd rounder, yeah, I think I'd be very interested in that. Before we get on to our 4th and final trade targets, we've got an awesome deal going on thanks to Fanatics. you don't just get one shirt on sale. You get 2 shirts on sale when you go to chatsports.com/Broncos combo. Summer is here. It's warming up. So make sure you are repping your Sunday squad by also getting a good deal when you go to chatsports.com/Broncos combo. That link's in the comments and the description of today's video. As for our 4th trade target, let's keep it on the defensive side. What about Grover Stewart, defensive tackle from the Colts? So Stewart has been mentioned in a lot of trade rumors throughout the offseason so far. He has been an extremely reliable player for Indy. He's only missed 2 games in his 6-year career. Originally a rotating player on the defensive line, he has become a staple on the Colts defensive line. He's sort of been overshadowed by DeForest Buckner and Yannick Ngakoue, but he has been one of the best in terms of interior defensive linemen, ranking 35th out of 127 qualifying defensive linemen according to PFF. Here are his stats over the last 4 seasons when he's been a staple of the Colts defense. He doesn't offer a ton of pass rush upside. He's coming off 4 sacks, which for a defensive tackle that's primary job is run stopping, 4 sacks is pretty good if you ask me. So he does offer you some upside on that half of the field, but he is primarily a run stopper, which I'm never opposed to adding more run stoppers. Now, when it comes to the financial side of trading for Grover Stewart, here are the numbers behind it. If you trade him after June 1st, which we are at this point now, his base salary, which a new team would be taking on, is $9.2 million. Usually, the team that trades away the player eats some of that money to facilitate a trade. Cap savings for Indy, 9.6. So you can see why a team like the Colts, who are rebuilding, in my opinion, could be interested in saving $10 million. Very little dead money. It's the last year of his contract. So Grover Stewart could be on the way out. For the right price, I'm interested in adding any above-average players, especially in the trenches, right? Where I think Sean Payton early on is going to want to improve at. They've focused on the offensive line in free agency. They didn't do a ton on the defensive line in the draft, so maybe now they decide to bring on Grover Stewart too. If he plays well, you ink him to an extension, and you've got some good building blocks on this defense for Sean Payton. Our 5th and final trade target now for Denver, Dalvin Cook. I usually say save the best for last. In this case, this is probably my least desirable of the 5 options. He is expected to either be traded or released by the Vikings. And who knows? Maybe by the time you're watching this, he's already been released or traded because we are filming this live on Tuesday during our show. He was drafted partially by George Payton in Minnesota when he was the assistant GM. Now, when you look at Dalvin Cook's salary, this is the big hiccup. No one wants to pay a guy $10.4 million after averaging 4.4 yards a carry, a career low last season for Minnesota. He's still a 1,000-yard rusher, 4 straight seasons, and 8 touchdowns. So for him having a 1,000-yard season as a down season, he still has some juice left in the tank. But Dalvin Cook also led the NFL in rushers that were 1 or fewer yards per carry. With Javonte Williams making good progress on his rehab and being way ahead of my schedule, or really anyone's schedule, this one really feels unlikely. Now, if Javonte were to suffer a setback, maybe George Payton goes, hey, we're going to be a run-heavy team. I still have some friends in Minnesota. We can get him for nothing. They'll eat a lot of his salary. They'll send him over here, and we'll get a nice committee going with Dalvin Cook, Samaje Perine until Javonte Williams returns. That is the only path I can carve out for this trade going down. I think it's highly unlikely, but there are some connections, so you can't quite rule it out. So I want to know from everyone watching before we get on out of here, who do you want the Broncos to trade for? One of the 5 guys we talked about on today's show? Is it someone else I forgot about? Let me know who you want to see in Denver this season. Who do we want? Official Juan 400 says we need Cook. Justin says NC. We didn't have an NC on today's show. Am I forgetting something? The Bronco kid, only if Cook is willing to take a pay cut. Yeah, there's just no way Dalvin Cook plays as scheduled in Minnesota this season. He's going to either get released or they're going to try and find a trade at the 12th hour, right? I just don't see a way he is on the books for $10 million or whatever in 2023. Italiano Stallone says Trey Lance Kiko says, how about D-Hop? This wide receiver room is loaded. Like, it's loaded in that it's just full. Is DeAndre Hopkins better than Courtland Sutton? Yes. But they are paying Courtland Sutton a lot of money. So I don't see them adding DeAndre Hopkins without moving on from either Sutton, Judy, or Patrick. And you're not moving on from Judy after picking up his fifth-year option. They're very optimistic about Patrick's return from the ACL injury. So the odd man out was Courtland Sutton, which maybe that happens, but I don't think it's very likely. Now, if you have any questions for our mailbag, which will be just around the corner, get them in right now. Hashtag Broncos in the chat, or you can super chat. We've already had 2 super chats fly in. If you want to guarantee a spot on screen, super chat, and we will start the show off with your question. So get your questions answered right now. Hashtag Broncos or super chat. Super chats go an extra long way to help support the channel. They're always greatly appreciated, but don't feel pressured to do so. Liking the video, commenting, all that good stuff is a great way to help boost the channel. Yep. We'll start with the one with the question. Yep. Italiano Stallone do not need another wide receiver. We got Galaxy asking a question. Hashtag Broncos. Get those questions in or comments. If you just want to kind of talk ball, talk shop for a moment, hashtag Broncos is just a way for our software to put it on screen. So without that, we can't put it on for everyone watching to see. Mr. McCullough, our executive producer, we kind of good on questions? Okay, we got plenty of questions. All right. So if you want to get on screen, guaranteed to beat the buzzer, super chat. Otherwise, you're at the mercy of Big Text to pick his favorite questions. With all that being said, let's take a breath and let's jump into a live mailbag. What's going on, everyone? Welcome into a mailbag here at the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. Matthew Peterson fielding questions that you guys have asked during our live show, which airs Tuesdays at 3 o'clock Mountain Time. So if you want a question to be answered, tune in for our next mailbag next Tuesday, 3 o'clock Mountain, 4 o'clock Central. So our first question comes in via Super Chat from Ronald Putnam. We definitely need to consider more edge rushers on a one-year deal. If we can get Lance for a third round, go for it. So we're talking about edge rushers, talking about getting Trey Lance. Let's start the edge rushers for a brief moment here. We can actually throw up Leonard Floyd's contract, and that's kind of a good blueprint of what a edge rusher one-year contract could look like for a Yannick Ngakoue, a Frank Clark, right? Someone who has gone unsigned, at least now at this moment while we do the show. So Leonard Floyd's contract with Buffalo, it's a one-year, $7 million deal. So for Denver, they can make that happen. They've got $10-ish million in cap space. I think this team could stand to add an extra edge rusher given the uncertainty around Randy Gregory's health. So I'm in on adding an edge rusher. As for Trey Lance, I'll keep it kind of short and sweet here. If it doesn't cost you too much, I think it's worth the flyer. Now, the debate is, what is too much? A first is too much. A second is too much. I'm not quite sure a third is too much. I think I'd be interested in a third because it's worth seeing if he could live up to that third overall pick status somewhere else. Thank you so much for the super chat. Next question coming in from Dimitri. Jonathan Cooper is way underrated. If it's me, I wouldn't sign anyone as a pass rusher because I'd like to get the younger guys going like Benito. So let's actually put up the 2022 stats from the top 4 pass rushers Denver has. I like Jonathan Cooper, 7th round pick out of Ohio State, who I think has a good shot to be a contributor as far as 7th rounders go. Is he going to be the difference maker on defense to help bring down the quarterback? Not quite all the way there on it. As for Nick Benito, he was more or less a redshirt freshman last year. 1.5 sacks, 1 tackle for loss, which, hey, Denver's had some other redshirt players like that before, and it's worked out okay. I'm not crazy optimistic about Nick Benito's future. Like, I just don't see him being even a 7 or 8 sack player. Like, I know that 10 sacks is kind of the benchmark, double digits. I'd like to see Benito at least get to 5 sacks this season. I think that's a good, goal for him to have. And for someone that doesn't really appear to be, super high up on the depth chart, right? Not even a starter on this team right now. I could see Nick Benito being more just a rotational player. Mountain Time, what's going on, dude? What offseason move is not getting enough attention? Good question. I know it's easy to go with the Mike McGlinchey or the Ben Powers of the offseason or Zach Allen. What about Marquez Callaway? So he was a UDFA coming out of Tennessee, signed with Sean Payton in New Orleans, and he offers a lot of upside in special teams, right? He did some punt returns in college, some kick returns, a spot that's kind of up for grabs after Montreal Washington's hideous-ish performance last season. So Callaway could crack through in that department. Now, his best season so far was in 2021. He really emerged for New Orleans, 698 yards and 6 touchdowns. I mean, almost a 700-yard receiver as a UDFA in his second season. Now, last year for New Orleans, he fell down the depth chart a little bit. He couldn't quite recapture that magic he had in 2021. But I think this could be a sneaky move to watch for on the special team side of things, and I'm sure Sean Payton has a good role for him laid out. So if you want to sound smart at the bar, don't go with the Mike McGlinchey. That's too easy. How about a Marquez Callaway? Now, off-the-wall question here. Will Denver finish in the top half of the AFC West? Will they be better than the Raiders and the Chargers? Because I'm going to pencil in Kansas City to finish first or second, but it's probably going to be first. So can they beat out LA and Vegas to be the number 2 team in the AFC West? This is the pinned comment on today's show, so scroll on down and let me know your thoughts. Octavio Rodriguez, are you going to any Broncos games this season? I'm trying to decide which one to go to. Might have to go to the Raiders game in Vegas since I live in Phoenix now and it's close. Well, unfortunately, my job doesn't really permit me to go to Broncos games because we cover the game in the studios here at Chat Sports as soon as it ends with a recap, highlights, watch party. So as bizarre as it sounds, it's actually a lot easier for me to do my job at here at the office where I can do a video once the game is over. Whereas if I go to the game, it's not really accessible walking out of the concourse. Which game would you want to go to? Vegas, at Vegas, would be a lot of fun. Very expensive, though. Like, tickets at, Allegiant Stadium are not cheap. I think maybe I like the Bears one. That's on the road. Yeah, I like that game. Go with the Raiders. Go to Vegas. What about, who am I talking about going to Vegas? Shame on me. Go to Vegas, dude. Have a blast, Octavio. Jair, are there any good free agent cornerbacks and defensive tackles available? Cornerbacks, first one that comes to mind is Marcus Peters. He's 30 years old. He was with the Ravens for a long time. What about Bryce Callahan, right? Kind of a fan-ish favorite. Unfortunately, only got 2 out of those 3 seasons with him. But Bryce Callahan could be an interesting reunion return back to Denver. As for defensive tackles, they added Tyler Lancaster from Green Bay, or I guess from Vegas last year. So I feel like they probably feel that they're kind of content at that position. Shelby Harris is still on the street. He was this team's sack leader, right, 2 years ago. So I am not opposed to a reunion with Shelby Harris. This team was better with him than without him. So those are some names to keep an eye on, Jair. Appreciate the question. Now, if you are not subscribed to the channel, what are you doing? Come on. Mailbags are for subscribers only, so make sure you hit that sub button down below. That way you can be on a future mailbag and get your question answered for everyone watching to see. Galaxy69, nice. Do you see the Broncos making a move for a player to help this D-line long-term? Long-term, the only move that could do like a long-term move, I think would have to be a trade, right? If you wanted a long-term, you're not finding a long-term solution in free agency at this point, meaning if you sign Frank Clark or Yannick Ngakoue, they are defensive linemen who will sign one-year contracts at this point. So long-term, Chase Young would be your blockbuster long-term, right? Where you think you can get the second overall pick for way less because his asking price has gone down due to injuries, prohibiting him from playing much of the last 2 seasons. It could be a bit of a bargain if you were to get him for, I don't know, a day 2 or probably not day 3 pick, but a day 2 pick for sure. That would be the biggest long-term move I could really see them making. Do I see them actually doing it? Not at this point. I just think they want to hold on to their first and third round pick. That's the only picks they have in the first 2 days of the draft next season. They're going to need those picks to reset a little bit if things don't go swimmingly well in 2023. So I ultimately don't see it happening. Galaxy, thank you so much for the question. Ramon Rivera, what do you think if we traded Sutton and KJ Hamler in the same package? Not often that a team would want to trade for 2 wide receivers, right? That would have to have a huge vacancy on their roster where the only spot I could see, I really think Courtland Sutton, if he does get moved, it'll either be Detroit, shout out Trinity Benson, or the New York Giants, right? Both those teams have really thin wide receiver rooms, right? With Detroit, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, but you don't have Jameson Williams for the first 6 games of the upcoming season. So do I see them getting traded together? No. It's not, this isn't middle school basketball, PE. We're a package. So very unlikely they were to get traded together. I just don't see why a team would want to trade for 2 wide receivers. Broncos fandom. Who needs to have a strong minicamp? Good question. Strong. There's the obvious answer, right, of Russell Wilson. I'll try to avoid the cliche Russell Wilson because after last season, all eyes are on him. What about Courtland Sutton? I saw some reports that he looked really good at OTAs, some of the best we have seen since his 1,000-yard season. And the last couple of years, he hasn't been bad, but he definitely hasn't been everything that we thought he would be when he signed that extension. So I think Courtland Sutton needs to silence people like me who are a little bit more on the pessimistic side that he's going to be that top-tier wide receiver that he once was. So I think Courtland Sutton would be someone who really needs to not just silence the doubters, but tell George Paton and Sean Payton, do not trade me. I'm still a valuable receiver for this team. So what do you guys think about this, though? Over or under 1,000 yards for Sutton this season? He was a 1,000-yard receiver in 2019. Just barely got over it. Has not been back to the top of the 1,000-yard mark since then, though. Over, you for under. I'm going to go with under. I think this team is going to run the ball a good amount of times. Plus, there's a lot of mouths to feed. Like Greg Dulcich is going to be in for a bigger workload this season. You added Marvin Mims. You get Tim Patrick back. Jerry Jeudy is starting to really ascend. For me, I think Courtland Sutton might be an 800-yard, 5-touchdown receiver type player. Official Juan 400. How much would it cost to get Trey Lance? That is a very good question, Juan. I don't have a good answer for you. He was the 3rd overall pick in the draft. I don't think you're getting a first rounder for him anymore. You can see his stats over his career so far in the NFL, just 4 starts under his belt. I think Trey Lance probably gets like a Sam Darnold type trade. Remember, that was like a 2nd rounder, and then there was some conditional picks in there where depending on playing time and performance and whatnot, it could be bumped up. I think Trey Lance goes for something like that, where maybe it's a 2nd that could become a 1st if he meets certain playing time and other criteria, or maybe it's like a pair of 3rds that maybe one becomes a 2nd. I think it's going to be a trade that it won't just be a ham and cheese sandwich. There will be a lot of conditional things surrounding it that could elevate some picks or even keep them where they're at. So that's my best answer for you, Juan. Appreciate the question. Galaxy 69, another time. What's going on, dude? What do you think about signing a guy on the... Oh, we already answered this question. Producer McCullough flustered behind the screen over there. That's okay. We got more questions here coming in from Kiko Del Rio. Who do you think is a breakout player on offense this year? Breakout player on offense. My rule for breakout players are they cannot be rookies. So you can't break out as a rookie. I think it's Greg Dulcich. I think Greg Dulcich could be a player who really builds off of a really, great stretch in the middle of the season last year. Once he came back from this hamstring injury, which caused him to miss the first 5 weeks, he is someone I think this year could be in line to be a popular target for Russell Wilson. I think Dulcich could be a 700-yard, 4-touchdown type tight end, which I think quantifies as a breakout player, maybe even 800 yards. So Greg Dulcich would be my pick for this question. Last question coming in from Ray Haas. Do we really feel confident with our depth at offensive line? This is a fair point to make. I was a lot more concerned until they added Cam Fleming. I think Cam Fleming is a great swing tackle, where if you need him for a game or two, he can step in for a pinch. Long term, for a whole season, I'm not jazzed up about Cam Fleming as a team starting left tackle for 17 games. But for 2 or 3 here or there, yes, I like that. On the interior, I don't know, Jim, right? Alex Forsythe, I think, is a good pick in round 7. But I think you're on the right track of, do we really feel that confident? I can kind of read your tone from your question. That could be a spot where if an injury pops up, that could be this team's sort of downfall, and all of a sudden we regress back to 2022 where the offensive line is one of the worst in the NFL. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this mailbag edition of the show. If you have not subscribed, go ahead and do so. It's completely free, and you'll get yourself the best Broncos YouTube content all off season long. Over or under 1,000 yards for Courtland Sutton? I'm going to go under. I know it's a fun thing to do the own homer pick and go over, and he's going to get back to where he was. It's not even so much of doubting Courtland Sutton. I don't think this offense will have 2,000-yard receivers in it. And if I had to pick one, I would go with Jerry Jeudy. So then I just don't see a way another player has 1,000 yards. If they're going to run the ball a lot and they're spreading it to Tim Patrick and Marvin Mims and Greg Dulcich. For that reason, I'm going to go with under. Galaxy says a little under, like 900. I'm Frey's going with 800. I'm Frey also asked earlier, how much will it cost to get Zeke? 1 year, $5 million. That's probably what it costs to get Ezekiel Elliott at this point. Maybe that's a bit high. I'm not even sure what his minimum would be because he's played so many seasons at this point. It'll probably be very close to that number. So it might not be the vet min, but it's going to be close to it with maybe some incentives on it. Italiano Stallone 007 800. Yeah, 812 yards and 4 touchdowns for Courtland Sutton. Call me a hater. Those are my best predictions right there. Jack J. Berta, you're better than name pronunciations text. You want to give this last name a shot here? Bertignoli? That wasn't even that tough. I don't know. The bright light scared me. Do you think we need to sign another running back as a contingency if Javonte doesn't return? This is a very good point that Jack raises here, right? If Williams was not a limited participant already in minicamp and OTAs, I would say no, or say yes, whatever. But because he was a limited participant, clearly he's on track to be back very close to the start of the season. It may not be week 1 still. He was only limited, and these things tend to take some time for players to regain trust in their knee. But if a crystal ball tells me that Javonte Williams is suiting up and starting week 2, then you can probably live with Samaje Perine and Tony Jones handling the workload week 1, right? Latavius Murray came off the street, essentially, from the Saints practice squad, and he was awesome for this team last season, stepping in mid-season. So, So, I think you can live. Now, if Javonte Williams doesn't look like he's going to play for the first quarter of the season, well, then maybe you alter your plans in July and August, and you do add a running back. So, that's my answer for you, Jack. Eddie Martinez, if Gregory is a bust again, what could we get for him in a trade? What could we get for him in a trade? The issue is you didn't start the sentence very well, Eddie. If Gregory is a bust again, who's trading for him, right? It could be a 6th-round pick for Randy Gregory if he is let's say Randy Gregory plays 9 games and gets 4 sacks. Does that sound plausible, feasible to everyone watching? I would say so. So Randy Gregory, I'll make it nice. 10 games, 4 sacks, 4.5 sacks. After the season, maybe you get a 6th-rounder for him. You'll have 3 more years left in his contract. Now, a lot of the guaranteed money will be gone at that point. I bet at that point a team would restructure, make it a 1-year deal, put a lot of cash in it, and then move on after that one season. Kind of like Zadarius Smith from Minnesota to Cleveland. But if Gregory's a bust, you're not going to get much for him, Eddie. Italiano Stallone, what's going on? Hey, the show is cool. I would see if we can get a young QB for Sean Payton to develop. Well, first off, I love the start of this question here. I agree, it is a cool show. I'm not opposed. If it doesn't cost you that much, why not give Sean Payton a young quarterback to mold and start the contingency plan in case Russell Wilson continues his struggles? And unfortunately, this is just the new reality of Russ. Like, that's a very real possibility. Russ is just this now on, right? Maybe it's all Hackett's fault. We'll find out in a couple of months. But I don't oppose the idea of adding some young quarterbacks for Sean Payton to develop if it doesn't cost you that much. I think it's worth the flyer. Galaxy 69, would you entertain trading Simmons for Baker? Nope. I'm not going to even have to. I'm not being short with you because I think it's a dumb question or being rude to you for that. I just don't. They're similar players, but one's been with this team for his entire career so far, and he's a staple of the community. Why mess with that mojo? Why mess with that locker room to get someone who might be a hair better? But Justin Simmons missed 4 games last year and led the NFL in interceptions. I'm sticking with Simmons. I'm Frey. How much will it cost to get Zeke? Like I was saying earlier, 1 year, $5 million. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe 4.5 and some incentives. Now, unless we get a super chat, we will sign off here. But hey, you know I always appreciate all of the kind contributions and donations we get here at the channel. Really appreciate those of you that go above and beyond to show some love to us here. Producer McCullough did a great job behind the 1s and 2s, so clap it up for him. Now, appreciate everyone for tuning in. If you have not subscribed yet, go ahead and do so. That way you can get locked in for the best content all off season long. We'll give it another 20 seconds or so in case someone's got a question they want to ask via Super Chat. Otherwise, we'll pack things up here and we'll let you guys enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Always a great time talking shop with you guys here. Paul saying garbage INTs. Dude, I don't know how you have that many garbage INTs. Like, maybe you had one garbage INT, but no, I'm not going to listen to the fact that they were all garbage INTs. Like that, I just do not subscribe to. That's it. Thank you guys all so much for taking time out of your day, tuning into this live Broncos breakdown. We'll see everyone throughout the week with more updates, more news, more rumors, and all that good stuff.